So good morning, everyone, and perhaps good afternoon for several or many of you. So today, just really appreciate the fact and want to welcome you to joining us for our final day of the CIDCI 2021 Fall Forum. So my name is Stuart Ekblad. I am the chair of CIDCI, which is the Center for Innovation in the Design and Construction Industry. So we get this question. So what is CIDCI? We're a nonprofit organization, and we're an organization that's around curiosity. Our mission is to be a catalyst to improve the built environment and inspire innovation. We facilitate the exchange of ideas, of knowledge, and insights to address challenges and opportunities in our industry. So today, as we reemerge from the pandemic, the challenge of innovation has never been greater. And so we have, in our organization, we have established salons and various presentations, which we put together and put on our website and on YouTube. So we invite you to share our content and share it with your colleagues, share it with your clients. It's free. So CIDCI also offers a newsletter and free online webinars for our community of innovators in the AEC industry. I would like to introduce you to our board of directors. These are industry leaders representing the design, construction, academics, products, project delivery, owners, industry leaders in this particular segment of the industry. So just briefly, Dean Reed, Howard Ashcraft, Zig Rubel, Larry Hillman, Ian McLaren, Troy Thompson, Patricia Tillman, Rebecca Snelling, Simiha Ergan, Tiet Lee, and KP Redding. We have been very fortunate in this year to have established this particular board, who really does represent a wide variety or wide range of our industry. So our next is, we would just love to hear from you, and we would encourage you, knowing our board members that you just saw, is to get in touch with them and talk to them about questions that you may have, and also questions you have about how you can help us to accelerate innovation, your thoughts, your ideas, what's your company doing, what are you doing personally? And are there particular issues or individuals or people that you want to hear from, or that you want to make sure that we know about and can bring to the industry? These presentations we do, these forums, these salons, are really as a result of our ability to have these sponsors. And for this particular forum, we particularly want to thank Bosch for their support of this particular event, this 5-day event of our annual conference. And this gave us a real chance to learn about their incredible commitment to innovation and to improving the built environment. And again, to all of our other sponsors, we do and continue to really appreciate your participation in this organization. Now, I'd like to welcome you to the panel discussion. And so to that, I'm going to invite Yayu to introduce us to the next panel.
Thank you, Stuart. I'm delighted to join you and our audience today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from our panelists on a variety of really good questions today. I'm Yayu Lin, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Sares Regis, the commercial division. We currently oversee about $7 billion of ground-up corporate campus development for clients like Google, Adobe, NVIDIA, and Fortinet. And I feel very lucky that we get to work as an integral part of the owner's team. And as the owner's development manager, we facilitate the entitlements, design, and construction of some of the largest and most innovative corporate campuses here in the US. And here we are today, 20 months into the pandemic. And while we have all adapted to work differently, I'm sure most of us are still full of questions like, what's next? What's next for workplace, for real estate? What's next for design and construction? What's next for our supply chains? And what's next for innovations? I'll share that from our work with the large owners in Silicon Valley, I am seeing continued commitment and investment in building workplaces for employees to return to. I'm seeing that companies want to provide spaces for their employees to collaborate, to do creative brainstorming work together, and to just spend time together. And I'm also seeing companies more than ever focus on healthy buildings, double down on sustainability, and engage in community discussions and benefits. And those are just some of the reasons why I'm really excited that we'll get to hear from 3 outstanding leaders in our industry, each with his own perspectives and insights. And while they will introduce themselves and more and discuss their work in greater detail, I'd like to give you a quick sense of who they are. First, Kevin Antonelli is someone I've had the pleasure of working closely with the last 10 years. He's Director of Construction and Infrastructure at Google, the world's most popular search engine, and more. Brian Newman, he's Senior Vice Chancellor and Vice President of UC San Francisco, who leads the real estate division of the university and UCSF Health. And Matt Cukovecki, the lean IPD leader at Procter & Gamble, a company, it's a household name that ranges from probiotics to diapers. So I am very excited to hear from our panelists. So without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to Kevin.
Good morning, Yayu. Thank you. Good to see you again. I'm tired of these virtual meetings. We have to spend some more time together breaking bread and celebrating. Good morning, everyone. I've been in the industry for 31 years. I spent the first 25 years with Turner Construction, where when I left, I was a vice president and general manager for them in San Jose. For the past 6 years, I've been with Google. I started off as a development executive on the campus at Bayview. The project that Yayu is referring to has been going on for about 10 years. There was a couple of designs, a couple of stops and starts, but we are ready to open the campus at the end of the year. It's a 1.1 million square foot campus on a 42-acre brown site. You'll see a couple of pictures of it as I go through the presentation. And I've been, for the last couple of years, they asked me to see if we could, we're going to be doing more and more work. They asked me to become the director of construction and infrastructure and work across portfolios. And just recently, we've actually taken that to a global role so that we have more consistency across our projects as we go and build more globally. I think you've seen the commitments from Sundar and Google about not just building in the Bay Area, but building elsewhere in the United States and globally for our diversity goals and to grow outside of the Bay Area. I just pulled a couple of articles from papers and publications, and you can see we're a Mountain View based organization. We've got 23.1 million square feet of commercial property. You can also see back in March, we committed $7 billion to offices and data centers. And then just recently, we have been able to get the green light to build a multi-billion-dollar mega campus in San Jose, which I'm sure many have read about or seen articles about, which is in the early design phases. So you can see this is one of our projects we have, and most of these projects, actually most of them are in Sunnyvale Mountain View right now. This is a Humboldt project, typical steel project. We did a prototype 1, now we're building 4 exactly the same with connected bridges. This is our first mass timber project. We are committed to mass timber. As a matter of fact, my boss said, it's either mass timber or you tell me why not, right? So we are working from that premise of this is the product we like, this is the product we've heard our people like. It's innovative, creative, sustainable. It's a great product, and we're going to use it more and more as we develop across the world. This is 901 Cherry. It's the YouTube project as we expand more and more with YouTube. As many have heard, YouTube is a success, having great success as a platform. Next. This is the project that Yayu and I have been working on, and these pictures really don't do it justice. It is an amazing campus that has been sort of an R&D process for us at Google to understand how people work. And this was pre-pandemic, so we've had to make a few adjustments, and I'm sure we'll make more adjustments as we move forward. But it's, as you can see if you can see the scales on the roof, the entire roof is covered with photovoltaics. And we're using that to generate on-site electricity. It's also at the end of the day, I hope it's a pedal project at the end of the day where we're completely off the grid for water use. It's the largest geothermal pile system in North America. And this is Charleston East. This is a view that this looks exactly like Bayview, except there's 3 of these at Bayview. So same thing, photovoltaics on the roof, water sustainability, all of the stuff that we're putting and committed to as Google as we move forward on our projects. And with that, I can turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Kevin. I organized my presentation around some of the questions that Margie posed to us as panelists. First of all, I just want to say I'm thrilled to be here, and I've been following CIDCI through Stuart, and happy to be a first-time participant in the session. A little bit about myself. Yeah, you already mentioned my title, but a little bit about my personal life. Jen and I, we've been married for almost 20 years. Met in the Bay Area. She was working for UCSF at the time. Actually, I was a Cal student. We have 3 kids: Amelia, who's in high school, and then the twins, Cora and Owen, who are 9 years old in 3rd grade. We also happen to have a dog, a cat, a hamster, and 2 fish. So the house is very busy. I've largely been active and living along the I-5 corridor between Portland and San Francisco. My hometown is Portland. I'm a 3rd-generation Oregonian, although it's interesting now that my life is focused on San Francisco and the Bay Area that my great-grandparents actually left San Francisco just after the 1906 quake and were some of the earlier California refugees who came up to Portland, settled there, and now, of course, my life is back in the Bay Area. Got my master's degree at a small liberal arts college in Salem, Willamette University. My master's degree, as I mentioned earlier, I went to Cal and got a master's in city and regional planning in the late 90s, which is when I met Jen. And right now, surprisingly, I actually commute daily. Well, prior to COVID, it was daily during the weekly, I should say, to San Francisco. So my carbon footprint is enormous, but that's not the long-term state. I promised my daughter that she would finish high school in Oregon, and then when she's done, we'll move with the twins down to the Bay Area. I had a little bit of an interesting path to my current role. I spent about 10 years after graduate school in politics, serving as an elected official in the city council, as well as the Metro Council, or I should say a city council in the Portland region, and then the Metro Council, which is the regional government overseeing the 3 counties and about 24 cities. I was elected to 2 terms in the Metro Council, and then in 2007 left to become the director of planning and real estate for Oregon Health and Science University, which is very similar to UCSF, a large medical center, health professional education, biomedical research, but no undergraduates. The largest employer in the city of Portland. And then after 11 years with OHSU, where we delivered about 2 million square feet of facilities on our new campus on the what's called the South Waterfront area of Portland. Those of you who know Portland, it's just south of downtown and connected by an aerial tram to our main campus on Markham Hill. After 11 years there, I was wooed away by UCSF to come join UCSF. And I thought 2 million square feet was a lot of development, but since I've been at UCSF, the scale is just enormous. We've completed about 8 buildings in the 3 years that since I've joined UCSF, and we've got 3 more under construction right now and many more in the pipeline. So a little bit about what is UCSF real estate. That is kind of an umbrella term for all the teams that manage and shape the physical growth and development of UCSF. That includes our campus planning and campus architect, our building permits. We actually we're a constitutional entity, so we issue our own building permits and have a building official, which is interesting for those who aren't familiar with the UC system. We have our design and construction teams, which includes health and the university and major capital. And then we have our real estate portfolio and transactions team as well. We have about 190 of us between both employees and contractors that make up UCSF real estate. And what we do is we create exceptional places for healing, discovery, and learning, all in support of the mission for UC San Francisco. So a little bit about the institution. We're consistently ranked in the top 10 of hospitals in the country. And we also have top 10 schools of medicine, dentistry, pharmacy, nursing. So very well recognized and respected across the country. We're the top public recipient of NIH research funding. If you include private institutions, we're just number 2 to Johns Hopkins, and proud that we have the newest Nobel laureate of medicine announced earlier this week, Dr. David Julius. We have about 30,000 employees, which makes us a big institution in the Bay Area, 4 campuses, about 10.5 million square feet of facilities, not including the many that are currently still under construction. And then our capital plan that my team and I are managing is about $10 billion over the next 10 years. So quite a bit of spending. And that's right now we have probably about 350 open projects. And that's our typical annual average of about 350 projects, including our major capital projects that, of course, take multiple years to implement. The bigger ones that get the attention are our 2 new hospitals that are in the pipeline. We have the Helen Diller Medical Center at Parnassus Heights. That's a current rendering. We're not in final design, but that's the current state. We have HDR and Herzog de Meuron as our architect team. And that is part of a campus-wide transformation of Parnassus Heights. About $7 billion of the 10 I mentioned is being spent at Parnassus Heights to transform that campus. As many of you who know or have been following UCSF, we've spent the last 25 years building out the Mission Bay campus, and now we're turning our attention back to our original campus at Parnassus Heights, which needs some love, frankly, and we'll be building this new hospital, a research and academic building over the next 7 years, and several other projects as well to kind of rejuvenate and bring that campus up to a state that equals Mission Bay. And then across the bay in Oakland, we have a children's safety net hospital, Benioff Children's Hospital, Oakland, that is in need of modernization and expansion. And so we have a large project there, also set to be delivered over the next 10 years. So the other question Margie posed is, how is your organization thinking about innovation? Just real quick, I can't not acknowledge Stuart and his team and their work around integrated project delivery and the IFOA. And specifically, I know that we're not the first. Sutter and Penn Medicine have been doing a lot of this work, but it's clear we're the first campus within the UC system, which is actually a big deal for UC, which tends to be a bit risk averse. We're the first campus to get the Regents' approval to go with an IFOA contract, and both the hospitals I just mentioned will be delivered under an IFOA. And the first one, the Helen Diller Medical Center, will certainly be probably the largest IFOA project ever constructed, based on the size and scale of that project at north of $3 billion. Another area that we're focused on as far as innovation is supplier diversity, as far as using our economic impact and with the $10 billion spend over 10 years and trying to do more than just deliver projects, but create economic opportunity for populations and firms that have historically been excluded from that opportunity. So that's a big focus of ours, not just across the institution, but in construction and in design and construction specifically. And then another area is you can't build anything in the Bay Area without talking about community benefit around affordable housing, around transportation and traffic management, around open space. We've committed to delivering about 1,200 units of housing over the life of our Parnassus plan, and about 1,000 of our entire housing portfolio, dedicating about 1,000 of that, mostly new construction, for affordable workforce housing, which obviously is a big topic in the Bay Area. And then finally, what am I passionate about? I'm fortunate that I've got a great team that know a lot more than I do about project delivery and construction. I'll just be honest about that. And so I support them and I get out of their way. And so they innovate all the time. And so I really focus where I can add value, not duplicate their effort, and make sure that they're successful. And there are 3 areas that I tend to focus on and that I'm passionate about. One is team health. We've tried to adopt a culture of recognition within UCSF real estate, really celebrating our successes, celebrating our team. We talk about our values a lot. We have our pride values: professionalism, respect, integrity, diversity, and excellence. There's not a meeting that goes by where we don't talk about our pride values. And then we also support our teams as best we can as far as the resources for professional development and training, celebrations that they can have, and then just team building. I also tend to focus on strategy. We are very serious about not just being an implementer of decision, but helping shape decisions as a strategic advisor to leadership. That means aligning our business plans, our space needs, programmatic needs, our internal and external relations with stakeholders, including the neighbors that surround us, and our capital projects to check off as many boxes and deliver what we can for our leadership and for the institution. And then finally, I'm obsessed with decision making. In a large institution, that's as much art as it is science, but making timely, durable decisions in a big, complex, bureaucratic institution like UCSF is extraordinarily important. For me, that means being completely obsessed with communication and how information is delivered and making sure we have the right information at the right time for our leaders to make the decisions that we need so our teams can be successful. That means using tools like A3s and choosing by advantage, but sometimes it's being a bit political and strategic and making sure that we are thinking of all the things that our leaders need to consider to be successful. So with that, that's a little bit about me and kind of what I focus on, and I'll be happy to turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, thanks for that, Brian and Kevin. I'm gonna say now I'm jacked up, excited. Let's go. This is. I want to get on to the talk. I don't need to share my stuff now. So who is Matt? So Matt Cukovecki, Procter & Gamble. I spent, so I'd first start with the top left up there. So I've spent the last almost 21 years married to my amazing wife. We have 4 just awesome kids. They're fantastic there. 10th, 8th, 6th and 4th grades. So busy kind of defines our life. But we are super passionate about a whole lot of things: sports, outdoors, family time, traveling. We're getting ready to go on a family trip next week, actually. And so those things all kind of balance and fit in with, well, what excites us in other areas. So kind of the top right quadrant, and I'll give you full disclosure. This is shameless reapplication of a bunch of different things that I do all the time that I just kind of put together to kind of make sure that it was in context for today. But the top right-hand side of this, or the top right quadrant, is really a story of where do I come from and what is some of my more professional career. So undergraduate in electrical engineering, master's degree in mechanical engineering. I spent time in the automotive industry as a design and systems engineer. So I'm super passionate about cars and all of that kind of stuff. But then transitioned to Procter & Gamble in 2007 and spent 9 years as a design engineer, as well as a project manager, construction manager, cost engineer. I really have spent most of my career has been playing at different roles and at different levels, working on project execution. So the parts of me that come with this is that ability to solve, and I love challenges and I love to innovate. So with that said, let's talk, So again, a little bit Matt Cukovecki, P&G, all that good stuff, but we're here really to talk about innovation, right? So if we were to ask Merriam-Webster, what is innovation, right? Webster's would say it's a new method, an idea, or a product. So innovation in this design and engineering and construction world that we're talking about, right? We have to do the same things that we've always done. We have to do them in a new way. But my question for everyone listening is, what is innovation for you? Like, why do you innovate? What is innovation? And what are your reasons for it, both personally as well as from a business perspective? I would propose that it's not for innovation's sake, right? That at least in my case, I do it because I love to deliver value, right? I love making sure that we're making progress against goals and it's equitable for all parties involved. So with that, I can't tell that story and what that means to P&G without really talking about our last 5 years in innovating the way that we approach design and construction is really is coupled and integrated completely with our lean integrated project delivery journey. So with that, this story really starts, like I said, about 5 years ago. And you can see there's a bunch of kind of like, why did P&G start to get into this methodology, and why is this an innovative approach? Because again, we're doing the same things that we've always had to do. We always have products to develop, products to make, to ship to consumers as a consumer products good company. And we need to do them in a different way. So how does that kind of fit? Well, it really kind of starts with this. One of our engineering leaders at the time, her name was Liz Fikes. She put forth a $1 billion challenge, and like so many kind of driven type A people are, I put a good challenge in front of me, and I get excited. And there was more than just one of us that did that. So as we looked more intentionally at what were some of the ways that we could attack some of these business goals, this $1 billion challenge is really around reducing our manual of CapEx expenditure to be more in line and or below what some of our competitors and the other CPG throughout the industry were spending as a percent of NOS. And so as you look at those types of metrics around why it's impactful for us, the need was very clear. And so we start talking about what other types of innovations can we use to apply? We got to do the same thing. We still got to build our buildings and buy new equipment and all those things, but we need to do it more efficiently. So that's really what this story is about. So for those of you that might not be familiar with Procter & Gamble, a little bit about who we are, right? About a $76 billion company last year, returned a little over $19 billion in money to our shareholders. We operate in about 70 countries. We create 65 brands, and we sell our products. Last check was 182 countries, I think. So a little over 180 countries sold around the world. And the products, as you can see across the bottom, many of the products you probably were not even aware were P&G, but it's even more extensive than that. But it's just an idea or a sampling of what it is that we do. So what is innovation in the sense of the way that we work, and what is impactful to our business? Again, being a large multinational CPG firm, we have multiple different types of projects that we need to be impacting. So we have international projects. We're gonna have large new site construction projects that could look like either facilities that would manufacture products and or places where we would have R&D and labs and perform our business functions. We're going to have equipment acquisitions as well as relocations that might need to make sure that our footprint for where we make products most closely matches where the consumers are consuming those things. And so sometimes as those markets and products shift, some of those take place. And then we have, what does it take to maintain our ongoing business, right? We've got always improvements to buildings and facilities, as well as product upgrades that will drive changes along the way too. So again, we call those our small projects. So it's a wide breadth of what does project execution look like in this CapEx space for us. And so we have to think through some of the dynamics and what it means for all those. And I won't go through all these, but as you can imagine, right? What does it take for us to lead projects when we go international? Because as we talk about integrated project delivery, we all recognize that much of that was really created here in the US and then taken from the West Coast to the East Coast and filled in the gaps around the horseshoe, and right for anybody that's been part of the journey along the way. Now it's spanning out international, and if we are going to use this as a strategy to, again, innovate the way that we deliver projects, we're going to have to be willing to teach and lead teams as we go around the world. So we have to make sure that we're intentional about specifically and very intentionally building teams to drive the business need that is equitable, again, for us as well as our partners as we go and put those new facilities in place. We have to be able to leverage data to inform what kind of decisions we make around where those what equipment we should buy, and then where it should be located to make sure that our entire supply chain is as cost effective as it can be. And then again, those small projects, they require, again, much of the data that's going to come out of industry on integrated project delivery. It's going to be the Brian story around, right, the $3 billion IFOA project, right? And again, I know that's the extreme to the other end, but we have to think about the very, very small projects for what does it take to maintain a facility as well. And so I know that these things are not unique to us, but as we try to figure out what this meant to us, this is very, very, it's a paradigm shift that we had to go through. So as we think about the massive space of what is out there in the world of lean or integrated project delivery, it's too much for, again, the systems and the structure that P&G has. We have to boil it down and simplify it a little bit. So we keyed in on these 7 essential practices. And again, without reading through all of them, there's some of the key ones that we believe are going to offer the most universally applicable type benefits to the most types of projects. And so these 7 essential practices have a bunch of different considerations for which ones might apply. Again, these are not unique things to us, but as you take this back a few slides and think through international large CapEx project executions for major expansions, greenfield, brownfield, all of the above, as well as what does it mean from an equipment space, which is not something, and when I say equipment, this is not mechanical systems for design and construction that we might think about as part of this community, but for me, it's how do I make my products? And so, but that's still a consideration and a factor, and it's a large portion of our CapEx expenditure. As well, then, how does this fit with that far right bucket of the small projects? So all of these constraints, these are things that we need to be able to consider to figure out, again, what does that innovation look like to the overall delivery? And so we pair these and kind of fit them with, okay, tools are important, but really knowing that people are what are required to deliver projects and bring this paradigm shift to life and really be able to realize this innovation in the marketplace, the behaviors and the way that we treat each other, the way that we interact, both internally and externally, wind up being an absolutely, probably I'd say, the most important part of it. And so that is a little bit about what innovation is at P&G and a little bit about our journey and myself. With that, I'll throw it back to you, Yayu, and we'll move on.
All right. Thank you, Matt and Brian and Kevin. I think let's start with some questions to just ground us in the time that we're in and for all the questions ahead. And definitely lots of questions. Curious minds want to know. So let's start with you, Matt. I will pose this question to all 3 of you, but what have you learned about your organization and your people during the pandemic? And maybe talk a little bit about what does return to office mean for your organization and your folks?
Yeah, this is a great question. And this is one that's getting a ton of press right now. If I had a nickel for every time I heard the phrase, right, the workplace of the future, that we all really can't seem to define because it's definitely going to be fluid. But what we've learned about our people, to your first question and first point, I know that the confidence we have in our own resilience as individuals and as a group, as a community, how dedicated and creative people are to make sure that creativity has to come in the sense of what does it take to make sure we maintain connection? Because we as humans require connection, right? That doesn't mean that has to be how we get all of our work done, but we require connection. And the dedication, there was a fear early on about, what will happen? Well, it wasn't even about the same productivity, but will we get anything done was honestly a question that was floated around out there, even whether it was spoken or unspoken, it was a concern. But I think what has shown through the creativity, the drive, the ability to stay together, that resiliency has just been shining through and through. So it's been fantastic to be a part of, honestly. I think that there's so many blessings that we've learned along the way. It's just great. Your return to office aspect of the question, it's a little bit different for what we consider our essential personnel versus our non-essential. Our essentials never left, honestly. They continued to do their work in their spaces with all COVID procedures as we've all had to work in and around. For the rest of the non-essential folks, though, it's really been, at least my group in particular, we are at a 40% occupancy, which means that we've spaced everybody out, right, such that we can comply with guidelines. and we go in 2 days a week. So I personally am in Monday and Thursday. There's other groups that are in Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. And so we try to do it again by group to maintain some level of community for when we are able to get face to face. So that's a little bit about what return to office looks like for us today. Where it goes in the future, oh goodness, if we could only tell.
Well, Brian, I mean, would you chime in here, because you definitely have a very different perspective of, you know, living through and working through the pandemic, being, you know, hospitals, and love to hear from you.
Yeah, well, it's true. We could send our patients and doctors and wet lab researchers home. But that said, I think we're a little bit more nuanced because we have some of the same very exact themes and lessons that Matt mentions. You know, for my team in particular, you know, their resilience, their creativity, their ability to seamlessly transition, at least very early on, quickly to mostly remote work was very inspiring. But not everyone went home at UCSF. And one of the challenges for an institution like ours is understanding that not everyone's having the same experience. We had our frontline physicians and nurses and other staff under enormous pressure, enormous stress. And frankly, you know, mental health and other kinds of challenges that they've had to deal with, where their morale and everything else was put to the test. And then the other half of the organization, frankly, their engagement and their morale, and in some cases their productivity, went up by working remotely from home. And so it was not one story at UCSF, and understanding that it's been really important, knowing that we have to be very sensitive and reward and support our frontline workers. So there was a lot of things that the university did to be able to do that. And then also for those of us who have the luxury of being able to work, whether it's full-time or most of the time from home, not taking that for granted and understanding that we have colleagues that need us and support them. So that's certainly what we've heard at UCSF. But I'll tell you about the future for our team and a lot of other teams within UCSF that don't have to be physically on campus all the time, is that we're embracing hybrid work going forward. My group, we're giving up 60% of our space. We're moving to completely unassigned offices and workstations. We're redesigning our furniture so that when people are in the office, it's much more collaboratively, you know, much more about collaboration with their colleagues, things that they can't do at home. And then allowing them to do their focused work and many of their meetings remotely. And so I suspect that going forward for my team, you know, 2 to 3 days on campus will be the norm to check in on their projects, do their site walks, meet with their teams. And then do their focused work and a lot of their internal meetings from a more remote location. And by doing that, giving up some space and hopefully repurposing it for other needs. And one of the pieces of that, and one last point, is those frontline workers who never got a break and were there full time. Many of them historically have not had the staff amenities, lounges, locker rooms. I'm not talking about just medical workers, but you know, valet parkers, custodial workers, shuttle drivers. We're now taking the space that other teams can give up, like mine, and repurposing it so they have the break rooms and the locker rooms and the staff lounges and spaces where, you know, they can get a reprieve from their work and do their work better and be more productive as well. So it's a more nuanced story probably than a lot, but we've learned a lot over the last 2 years, excuse me.
Well, Kevin, you got to tell us, because you bring a very different experience and perspective.
As I'm listening to Matt and Brian, and I'm wrestling with the fact that if you look at Google's earnings for the last 18 months, they've been off the chart, correct? Right? So we have a different, we're wrestling with different issues, right? I would imagine that most of our people are saying, well, if we're making those kind of profits, why do we need to come back into the office at all, right? Obviously it's working very well. But, you know, Google was built on, you know, Larry and Sergey's casual collisions, right? They really believe that innovation comes from Matt and I bump into each other, or Brian and Matt bump into each other, and hey, I've been thinking, and that doesn't happen on a platform like this, right? People, I think, are, you know, as my son went through, school last year, and he didn't develop any friends, right, from Zoom. It's a difficult place to develop friendship, and and Matt talking about trust and all that kind of stuff. I don't think you can build that without being in the office and having those casual collisions. So Sundar, our CEO, is continuously saying, look, we really want people in the office, and so we're going to do a hybrid. It's going to be a 3 and 2 right now. 3 days in, much like Brian's talking about, 3 days in, and then they do their heavy thinking and down, their focused work at their, wherever it is, working from home, the library, who knows, wherever they do their best work, but they do their best work someplace else other than the office, right? Their heavy creative stuff. But it's actually very important to Google for that, to continue with the casual collisions. So again, same thing with Brian. We're going to offer more big, rooms where people can get into smaller groups and get 5 or 6 people together, and then expand that out. So I think there's a lot of, what does the workplace of the future look like? We're still working on that. We have, as you can imagine, we have PhDs that are studying this, right? And all kinds of activities going on. And I think it's still an individual that it has to accept, that I'm going to go in the office with the perceived risks. So we got to make the offices comfortable, right? We have to make sure we've always done 100% outside air, right? So that people should be very comfortable when they come into the office, that we are not recirculating, the air that everybody's breathing, right? So there's things we need to do in the construction, is to tell our people, you're safe here. Here's how we're keeping you safe, right? And making sure that we're implementing all of those precautions as we think about people coming back into the office. So that's really where we're spending a lot of our time and thinking about when they come in, how they gotta feel safe in that office.
And so, Brian, you brought up a really interesting comment of committing to giving up space and repurposing that space. So talk a little bit more. How does this shape how you think about real estate and then innovation going forward on behalf of UCSF? And I think you started to touch on this in your presentation too.
Yeah, we've challenged all of our administrative departments to look at their space footprint and look at relinquishing space, and understanding that we can't have it both ways. We can't have the freedom and luxury, if you will, of doing more work remotely while keeping an empty desk that's just collecting dust and represents a real poor use of resources on campus. And so most people have understood that compact and that trade-off. And those administrative teams are giving up space. And for us, that means we can get out of more expensive lease spaces and make better use of our own buildings by using that space more efficiently as we transition people away from the leases. So that's really important for us long term. But I just want to I agree that not everything can happen remotely. We're still big believers in the magic of the big room and getting people in a space to collaborate and to work together. We're spending money right now to build 2 big rooms on the Parnassus campus by converting parking spaces in a garage to office spaces. And so I don't want to give the impression that everything can happen from home. We have struggled with onboarding new individuals we've hired during the pandemic, as well as onboarding entire teams for projects that we have launched and doing it remotely. We're trying every trick in the book, as you can imagine, to do virtual activities and happy hours and sharing, all the things that you can think of. There's nothing magical necessarily or unique that I have to share other than trial and error through a lot of different activities to be able to kind of build that culture, that team culture, and also to develop the relationship with those new employees. It's just like Kevin was mentioning with a student starting high school or starting any school remotely. I felt bad for my employees who are being onboarded during this period, but I think we've done everything we can creatively to kind of overcome that challenge.
And Matt, you also talked about that for your teams, there's definitely varied experiences of, people that continue to come in all the time, and you're at 2 days a week. So, and I mean, in the work of construction, which has long been an in-person process and culture, how are you approaching the divide if there is one, for people who are remote and virtual versus the physical aspect of our industry?
I would say, right, so much to the same sentiment, right? I think that we started the conversation saying, hey, we've done really well with right, overcoming the situation that, again, we didn't create it, but we've adapted and we've responded as effectively as we can. I don't think that any of that negates the massive impact of what happens when people spend face-to-face time to truly coordinate, collaborate, and work together to bring something to life. And so, again, if I think about from our experience in the design and construction space specifically, right, this transition, this shift to integrated project delivery, it is very different than the design bid build world that we come from. And when we think about that shift, it's really goes from a transactional to relational. And that is not something that you can coach teams into. That is not something that you can get inherently. Again, you can understand it intellectually. That doesn't mean you have any idea how to go and do it. And so we can use all of the, call it virtual tools that we can in that environment, right? I was on the, I'd say the fortunate and unfortunate situations. So just like Brian claimed for his space, I was working together. We had just kicked off validation for what wound up being P&G's largest IFOA that we had signed. And that team, as soon as we started validation, into the validation phase, COVID hits, completely virtual. We're virtual for the next almost 4 months. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to work together as not just an internal team where you already have some alignment on cultures and systems and tools and some of those things, but now we're trying to build a full IPD team. And as soon as we have it built, guess what? All virtual. And so again, we tried to leverage some of the tools, right? We tried to create a virtual big room. We went into sharing a bio weekly as part of team meetings. We did intentional 30-minute connections that were highly intentional at driving engagement. And I'd say getting as vulnerable as you're willing to be in the moment, but just truly trying to make connections. And honestly, they felt a little bit forced because we weren't in person to be able to do any of that stuff together. So I summarize it kind of in one way, right? We have to get to what I consider high fidelity communication. It's not only about the content, but the context that makes sure that we really are on the same page. And I don't know a way to do that virtually as well as I do in person. And so we still are going to be looking at everything we can to get the critical core players. It's probably going to be a smaller group than what it once was as we were earlier in our journey. But we're still going to be working to get those people face to face because we just know that it makes a huge difference. So,
well, I mean, I feel like, this is a great question for Kevin and Google and the forefront of innovation and technology and tools. What tools, technologies, have you tried? Are you trying to use to facilitate this collaboration? Because it's clearly a common theme that we're all coming to is that it's hard to do collaboration work on virtually. So what's helped? Do virtual happy hours work? Do they help?
Well, speaking from the construction side, I started. We have a $15 billion program, and it was, how are we going to put $15 billion worth of work in place in a quick time frame, right? So I went out and I decided that we would do progressive design build as the selection process for Google for our major ground up projects. And so we went through a process of, going through the ENR and who's doing design build and how are they doing it and blah, blah, blah. And we ended up down to 9 general contractors that we work with. And so the thinking behind that is, we're going to have 9 GCs. Everybody's going to get a bit of this work. And so we're going to spread it across, maybe it's a 7-year program, 8-year program, 10-year program. And we're going to have these GCs as we, as Matt and Brian have talked about in the IPD world, right? This is all about integrated project delivery and speed and making sure that we are learning every time we put a project together. As you know, Yayu, when that project at Bayview, we have a lot of learning from that project. That team shouldn't lose that learning, right? We should use that team to go to the next job, right? And the onboarding becomes quicker, and the team development becomes quicker, and the team dynamics, right? Matt talking about, you lose that when the team doesn't know how to react, that social, how do we get together fast, right? To make these teams, these are huge teams that we're talking about, right? These aren't small teams, and they come from all over the world. And so we have to be able to respond quickly. So my thinking was, if we have these teams, we can roll them out faster. So then we ended up saying, okay, why don't we've got 9 GCs, why don't we have 9 design architects that we like throughout the world, who have visions of what Google wants to do in our workplaces. So we have those 9 architects as well. So, and then I have a forum, and you can imagine I do this on a quarterly basis with the GCs. I have 9 GCs in a room for 4 hours, and I have 9 architects in a room for 4 hours. And you can imagine what I first thought that none of them would talk to each other, right? I thought that there would be these walls, and there would be these, oh my gosh, we don't want to, we have secrets, right? General contractors, we all have secrets. I said, nobody wants your secrets. You're all safe here. What we want is innovation, creativity, what's working, and we want you to share that all the time when you come to these, not just with Google, what you're doing on Google projects, but you have to tell us what you're doing for the Procter & Gamble's and the UCSF and all the others. It's not just about what we're doing here. We have to take all of that so I can churn, and we can churn together and continuously drive that innovation of every different projects that we're learning from, right? And what's working the best, we should apply it. And then hopefully, selfishly, I'm looking for decreased in cost, right? I'm looking for that to manifest into a place where I can say, where am I seeing savings? Am I seeing them in general conditions? Am I seeing them in design? Am I seeing them across? I'm looking at a data-driven company. I'm looking at all that information to make sure that we're driving costs out all the time, but pushing for innovation. In one of the forums with the GCs during the COVID, we had to have a virtual meeting, and they were saying that actually they're seeing a lot more use of technology to communicate with each other faster, which was a really good thing that I thought came out of this session, which, some of the tools they had never really applied. They kind of went into it and said, well, it's kind of costly, and this made them do it. And then it made them more efficient. And they were surprised that they actually could do more virtually faster than, maybe it didn't need to be in the big room all the time. So there's that constant evolution of discussion as we're doing this. So this is what we've been doing at Google. So, and it's been pretty amazing. And, we talk about pipeline, and we talk about projects coming down, because they're in business to make money as well, right? They're there to, what is it? I'm investing in Google. I want to know that you're going to have a project for me down the line. So this is how we're working and bringing those innovations into our projects, and then seeing what I see in the market and saying, hey, have you thought about that? And in all honesty, I go to my senior management and I say, there's a tool out there that I'd like to use, but it's costly for our GCs. Could we help invest in that tool, and maybe we use it on other projects, but that GC becomes a better partner for us. So that's what we're doing constantly on our mega projects. I hope that answers some of the question. Yeah.
Yep, it definitely makes a lot of sense. And I think with anything, we got to focus on the positive that came out the last 20 months, and that is still going to come out as we navigate through this. Brian, I know you mentioned you're starting 2 big hospitals. Anything you want to add there? Are you doing big rooms virtually, in person, or?
Yeah, the team certainly are. It's a mix of things. I can't say that there's new tools that we've pioneered during this period. We're just using our existing tools more deeply, more effectively. Microsoft Teams was one of them, obviously, that's been mentioned. The whiteboard, Miro, tools, Everything else where you can share documents and collaborate on documents, we're using more often, of course, as well. But as far as the other aspects or the other techniques, I mean, I think across the entire organization, we're having more daily huddles or active daily engagement. Some of our managers who maybe didn't take that quite as seriously, once we all went remote, understood immediately the advantage of checking in with their team every day. And checking, how they're doing, their team health, but also how they're progressing on their individual work. And so those kinds of activities that we've tried to push leading up to the pandemic, I think people have embraced much more so as a way to overcome some of this remote work and distance. But like I said, we've done all kinds of fun activities online, but nothing replaces getting people in a room. We thought everything was almost getting normal over the summer, and I remember we started kind of occupying spaces, having happy hours, things like that, and then everything went back to remote, at least in California, in the Bay Area, with the Delta variant. And so I'm hopeful for 2022. Crossing my fingers, because there's just nothing beats that in-person interaction to create that connection and to create, as I mentioned, kind of the magic of the big room. So we're building these big rooms with the intention of occupying them, not necessarily having 6 feet of distance. And we hope that that's the case for 2022.
And Matt, what are some of the resources and tools you and your team use to plan for the future?
Oh, I love this. I'm gonna assume that everyone, if you haven't heard it, I'm gonna say it anyway. I'm gonna assume everyone's heard the adage, right? That a goal without a plan is just a wish, right? And so planning winds up being at the core of what it really kind of, we talk all this great stuff about delivery and benefits and all those things, and without a plan, right, none of that stuff is able to get there, right? That's the translation. And so I think for us, one of the recognitions we've had, technology is going to continue to evolve. And so instead of getting super excited about any one application or any one technology for an application of a tool, what we have, I would say, again, we've got to pare down all of them that are out there. One of the most impactful tool, I think, that is really starting to set waves internally, it's, in my opinion, one of the most universally applicable tools, is the last planner system. So fundamentally, if you take, and again, apply this to what my group does, a very small context, what are our goals? Right? What are we trying to accomplish, even from a business context, from a teaming context, culture? Like, what are our goals? Then we can set some milestones, right? What would it take to look like where we're at today versus there? And so we kind of go from right to left. Then we do some phase pull planning, and those the phase pull planning that we might need to do around what would have to be true along the way. That's how, honestly, the action plans make themselves. Believe it. I mean, it sounds simplistic and sounds bizarre, but anybody that's actually worked through the last planner system, it is so many applications. It's fantastic. So that's one tool I would say is probably, it's around to stay. And again, there's many different technologies in which that gets brought to life. I love sticky notes. I'm a huge sticky note person. It's how I was trained in the work, and it makes so much sense to me, and I'm very visual anyway. So but we've transitioned to, we can do portions on whiteboards, and then we transition to whether it's touch plan, or even, honestly, we've had great interactions utilizing Mural or Miro, the 2 different tools, or a handful of other ones as well, to go help with some of that. But again, it's not as much about the technology, but that tool is super impactful for us. So not just for construction is my point.
I haven't tried that. I'll have to give it a try.
It's amazing, I'm telling you.
Sounds good. Well, see, learn something new every day.
That's what we're here for.
And the next question, I'm asking on behalf of all the audience, and myself included, how can the design and construction industry be better partners for you, especially in terms of, in light of innovation that we all just talked about? What would you like to say to your project partners, if you could? Like, if you could do this, it would be really helpful. Anyone who wants to take that first? Don't jump in at once now. Brian, you want to go?
Well, I'd say what we don't want is innovation as marketing. That's a quote I learned from Stuart, actually, when we were talking about something similar the other day. Innovation is extremely important, as are these tools. But sometimes, reality versus promise is not necessarily aligned. And so don't wait for the project to start innovating. Or at least our project, do that as a company, as a firm, within the culture that you're adopting and then the tools that you're utilizing within your own teams before we even hire you, frankly. So that's really important to us. But as far as just generally what we're looking for, I mean, we're looking for people who are willing to embrace shared risk and shared reward. That's the only environment where we align all of our interests with the project's success. And so, the IFOA is a key tool in that, obviously. That's but getting to shared risk, shared reward, and then also complete transparency. I think those two things are related. But we as an owner want as much transparency into the project and the project budget as we can. I think we've learned that IPD and IFOA are some of the better tools to be able to do that, but they're not the only ones. It's really about team culture and establishing that relationship with your partners. But from my perspective, those elements are extremely important from who we partner with.
I'd like to add on to that as well. I think we ask for more diversity and inclusion in your organizations. We need a different and a broader look at how we look at our programs and what we think about. So really think about how you can add, not just to make numbers, but to actually bring diversity and inclusion and bring it into the organization so it makes a difference in your organization from a different vision from what we've seen over the, in the years. I think that would really be a real big benefit to everybody.
I love that, and I only want to add on to what both Brian and Kevin said, because I think both their answers are spot on, and those would be major contributions to us as an organization and to all the owners that I know. I think about this when I think about focusing on innovation, I shift the narrative to maybe focus on innovate with people, innovate on your approach to people. Again, something that I've learned in the IPD world is, right, people get work done, organizations just create opportunities, right? They enable things to take place, but people are the ones that get work done. So if I think about focusing on the innovation of people, that really comes across in a couple of different buckets. Focus on leadership, not just management, right? Leadership as a commitment to the team and to the people that are around them. Right. I think about the mindset or the concept of what does it take to create a volunteer army? You do that, then you're finding leaders, right? That is a different type of environment or atmosphere. We get into positional power too often, and that is management. That is not leadership. So leadership is something that I think can be innovated on. The people that really are invested in continuous improvement are just massively impactful anywhere that they're going to go. Anytime you find a person that is willing to make themselves and the people around them better, it's a huge thing. And then if I can take a page out of Patrick Lencioni's book, right, from The Ideal Team Player, humble, hungry, and smart, those are the people that I want. And so put all of those together in a context of disciplinary mastery. We all have different roles. We're all going to play different parts to put together an end goal together, but that disciplinary mastery kind of underpins that all. But those other three elements are really if I think about innovating with the people, that's definitely a forefront for me.
And from all three of your responses, what I hear is the focus on people and trust between those people. And I'm glad you brought up also diversity and inclusivity, which are big topics right now and really have been for some time. How does that impact how you procure, or how does it impact your work and your company going forward? I'd love to hear more about that. Again, Brian.
Sure. Matt, you were clapping. I would love to talk about it. I alluded to it in my intro, but Matt, did you want to go first?
You're talking. Go ahead. I will tack on at the end, though.
Well, I think over the summer of 2020, after what happened with George Floyd and the protests, a lot of organizations, UCSF and UC as a whole included, looked internally to what we could do and do better. And all of our departments were challenged with adopting anti-racism goals, focused both internally with how we can address some of the concerns and cultural issues that are existed within departments and within teams, but also externally as well. And for us, externally meant this giant program that we're managing, and I know I've heard the similar stories from Matt and Kevin, to see, okay, can we do more than one thing with our dollars, rather than just, more than, what I mean by that is, rather than just delivering projects, can we actually create economic opportunity and address some of these injustices by, as I mentioned earlier, creating economic opportunity for firms and communities that have historically been excluded from those opportunities. And so we looked at ourselves and we looked at our data, and what we found out looking over the last 3 years, at least, of procurement, less than 1% of our procurement for design construction was with minority-owned, Black and Latino-owned firms, because that's the area that we're particularly falling short. Now, a big caveat, that's the data is self-reported. There's some holes in the data, and it's tier 1 contracts that we hold, not our GCs, the tier 2, tier 3 contracts, which frankly is probably more of the spending that we have than their tier 1 contracts. But nonetheless, you can't sugarcoat that. Even with our tier 1 contracts, as I've characterized it, it's very poor performance, but means that all we can do is go up. And so with using that data, we've engaged for just about every industry partner we can in the San Francisco area. We had a big event last spring where we invited minority-owned firms, particularly Black and Latinx-owned firms, which, according to our data, were more underrepresented than most relative to the communities we serve. And we shared with them the projects and what's in the pipeline, but we also spent a lot of time talking about what are the obstacles, real and perceived, to working with UC San Francisco and the UC system, from bonding and insurance to getting your foot in the door and the scoring systems we use when we select our partners. And we have a lot of work to do based on that feedback. It's great to be able to develop the roadmap. And now we've established pretty ambitious goals for the next 3 years as far as number of firms that we work with, the number of contracts that we issue, and the dollar amount of those contracts. So we have goals in all 3, but we have to do a lot of work to address those obstacles, address the way we score, make sure that our contractors and our prime architects are taking this seriously as well in the partners they select on our behalf, and hold our feet to the fire, and doing that through performance metrics. It's rhetoric is one thing, and I think we've done a good job as far as communicating our intent, but intent means nothing without follow through. And so now it's all about performance and measuring ourselves and how we do over the next several years as we implement this program.
Love that, Brian. That is awesome. And I love, right, the transparency around this is our data and it's not good enough, right? This is an area I'm super passionate about as well. This has been a focus for P&G for a really long time also. P&G has been a member of the $1 billion roundtable for many years. We've had over $2 billion in money that we've spent with diverse suppliers for the last 11 years running, and we recently just committed to $5 billion a year. And Lainey Bates is gonna kick me, but I don't remember exactly what the year is. But 2025 is coming to mind, but don't quote me on that. It's in a press release that just came out here within the last few weeks. With all of that said, there's multiple layers of this conversation that are impactful, and one that I get really excited about, right? Not only do we need our workforce that we work with to represent the communities in which we live, work, and play. That has an impact to the to the environment around us everywhere we go, no matter whether it's where we're manufacturing our products, whether it's how we shape and influence through ad campaigns. And I could go on a long list of what we do with that, from Gillette to Always, right? The Like a Girl campaign, oh goodness. Anyways, you follow me, right? There's a lot that we can do to influence with the media implications of what we do. But we know that it's, again, more than that. We know where we put our money has a contribution to what happens to those communities in which we live, work, and play. So that is absolutely a commitment which we're going to continue to push and drive forward. There's another layer at this. So I did a talk last year at LCI Congress on why diversity is an IPD imperative, and it may be the missing link between the results that you are looking for, and so best ever results versus just mediocre results. And so there's a concept in this which we have a fundamental belief, and we've got data to back it up, but we don't share it publicly, and that is that the money we've spent with our diverse suppliers is actually of higher value. We're getting more in return for the money we spend with our diverse suppliers. That has another link to the diversity of thought that comes into any group, any organization. If we're talking about innovation and how to drive innovation, the diversity of thought drives better and more creative solutions, right? When you're working together and truly trying to bring things from all aspects to, again, shape, shift, mold to make better ideas, that comes with more diversity of thought. And we can only do that by being intentional. So this has not only spend implications, this is changing the way that we are hiring teams. We're looking at metrics on the composition of the team, what those companies are doing and the places in which they live, work, and play, as well as then their subcontracting strategies. So this is it's a very holistic concept that matters on so many levels. It matters to every organization as people, and matters to us as humans on this planet as well. So just super excited about that.
Yeah, same here. We're part of the $1 billion roundtable as well, I think recently, for Google. Part of my big role is to make sure that we do get our numbers better. And I'm working directly with the unions, which is really where we're going to find a lot of support, right? Especially in the Bay Area, we are hurting for craft labor, and it's, everybody wants to work for Google or Facebook or one of the other firms, but we need to make sure that kids understand. I mean, I'm going to go back to my son. I said college, isn't always the answer. I mean, there's a great opportunity for you through trades, and I don't think a lot of the kids even look at that as an opportunity, right? And it's a huge opportunity for careers. And I think that we don't do a good enough job selling that. So I'm trying to work with the unions more and drive innovation in the unions and get people more interested in it, and get apprenticeship programs and that all of those type of involvement. So we're really focused on it. We have a great opportunity in San Jose. I mean, it's a fantastic opportunity to bring in more and more people into that. Not just from the entire construction process, but we got to operate and maintain those buildings, right? There's an awful lot of opportunity for minorities in that operations of our buildings and the running those facilities that we run too, right? That we got to look at, not just from the construction side. So we're focused on it greatly as well.
Thank you, guys. I do want to squeeze in one more question and just get a quick take from you guys. I think all of this discussion of, participating, using your dollar to do more than just build a space and to deliver a space is all part of, I think employers now are more and more expected to do more for the community and be a part of the community, and to what Matt said, where we work, live, and play, and where we raise our kids. And so maybe just the last question is, talk about how you're thinking in your organization, thinking about sort of community benefits, and what's your approach, and what are you focused on? And we'll just do a quick roundtable, and we can turn it to the audience questions.
Well, it's something we're focused on a lot. I mean, in San Francisco, you can't add 2 million square feet as we are at Parnassus, an established area, without talking about your impacts and mitigating those impacts and trying to do more for the neighborhoods that are going to be are going to have to live through 10 years of construction for our new hospital, for example. And so we negotiated a unprecedented agreement with the city of San Francisco and relative to the Parnassus plan around affordable housing and delivering affordable housing, around us funding directly muni service, around open space investments and preserving more open space on Mount Sutro, around first hire, meaning focusing some of our entry level and open positions for San Francisco residents, working with the building trades on local hire for our construction projects, and then ultimately negotiating the first ever project labor agreement for the University of California, which had historically not embraced PLAs. And so we did that as well with the San Francisco Building and Construction Trades Council. All of that culminated in a series of agreements between us, the city, the trades, that were executed right before the regions voted to support our project. And so it's extremely important. And in my role, that's where I spent a lot of my time focusing on it in order to get us through that thicket of public and political support and communications and dealing with the media, so our teams can then deliver the projects. It's not like it was necessarily 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, where you just focused on the delivery of your project, going to community meetings and talking about how we're going to contribute, be a solution around affordable housing for the new people we're going to hire is a big part of it. I know Google is the same, as are the tech companies on the peninsula, other tech companies on the peninsula. So it's a big part of the conversation now, and it's not that we're never going to go back to the way it was. It's going to be part of the larger conversation with at least these high growth cities with a lot of tech and other kind of creative class investments where they're really challenged by growth and with housing prices.
Yeah, I agree. All of our new programs have residential components, for sale, residential, some of our own use, residential, and commercial property, and it really is blending into the community and making sure that we're actually doing retail on our bottom floors and that kind of stuff. It really is becoming like a mini city when we build a development. And just like Brian's talking about, it's not going back, right? We have to participate in that. It has to become a little mini city, if you will, for all of our Google developments, and that's what we're focused on.
Matt, want to chime in here before we turn to audience questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So David Taylor, for anybody that's watched any news articles, he's got a famous saying, and I call it famous just because I think it's just so prophetic. P&G aspires to be a force for good and a force for growth. And that, I think, just kind of epitomizes what the sentiments are. And so if you look at the list of community impact programs, some of them are global. So you can look at our clean drinking water campaigns that are out there. You can look at disaster relief campaigns that are out there. So no matter where things are going, we've got trucks of dishwashers and laundry setups that they're on trailers. They literally travel to wherever disasters are taking place, and they're helping people out in the community. They are giving essential products for sustaining life in a lot of ways, right? From a hygiene perspective and other things, they're giving them to local community members and things like that. So there's numerous, those are just a couple, but their community impact is part of everything that we do.
Well, thank you all for your very thoughtful and honestly very inspiring approaches and thoughts, and on behalf of your organizations. So I am going to go to the chat box for the questions that's put in here. I think we have about 5 minutes, and I'm just going to go from the first question to the last. So this first question is from Corey. IPD was mentioned at P&G and UCSF for delivery, and Google's doing more progressive design build. How much do you see the model of delivery enabling or limiting innovation in the new projects? Anyone want to take this one? Matt, perhaps?
Yeah, I was going to say, I know from our perspective, I mean, I'll rewind all the way back to my intro. The way that the project is delivered is part of the innovation. It's part of how we're going to deliver value, because we're going to get intentional about how we build teams, how people work together, and then how we are going to systematically reduce waste along the way. And so that methodology that gets chosen, again, there's not one size fits all. It does not mean that we're going to do an IFOA on every project. We absolutely do not. Right? You have to right size and do a very specific strategy for each project that you're going to invest in, but it is a major factor, is what I would say.
I just to add on, I think I mentioned that, you know, the whole premise of why we're doing the design, progressive design build is to find innovation, right? To bring those innovations in at every project, right? Whether we're using it on the project now, we're gonna take that innovation and somehow implement it on another project and continue to drive out the waste like Matt's talking about. So that's really ultimately the goal for that delivery method.
I agree.
Right.
Nothing else to add. If you want to take on some more questions before we run out of time.
Sure. The next question is from Chad Johnson. Given the cost of living, work-life harmony, and traffic patterns, carbon footprint, what's a long-term planning for future offices, especially site selections? I think it may be, is it speaking to urban versus suburban? Anyone want to chime in?
It's huge in the Bay Area. You know, it's interesting. I was kind of talking to a lot of our employees and learning a lot about where they live. And, you know, I've got employees in San Diego who work in San Francisco, Sacramento. I'm currently from Portland, although that's not intended to be a long-term circumstance. But the thing that keeps me up at night is just, you know, recruitment, retention in a place like San Francisco. And so adopting this hybrid work model and allowing people to maybe ease off those commutes a couple days a week, if not more, if their role allows, is a huge part. So it's definitely front of mind right now as we look at our future work patterns and everything else.
Matt and Kevin, would you like to add to that?
I mean, yeah, just quickly. I mean, that's the reason we chose San Jose is ultimate light rail, heavy rail, and BART, right? I mean, that is, I mean, our parking ratios are like, you know, extremely low, right? We do not want people to drive. We want people to take the BARTs and ride their bicycles and build those communities where we can bicycle, you know, is our ultimate goal, right? So that's every time we're thinking about that, every place we put a development project is based on looking at all of those drivers.
And I would say the same thing as it's impacting us. Our considerations are slightly different, knowing that we're manufacturing products. So we've got other supply chain considerations that factor into our decision-making process. But it is probably one of the biggest factors that is influencing our investment strategy, where we're going to place what different types of investments, is access to craft, availability at the quality that we need, and the types of numbers that we need, and how that will impact the overall CapEx possibility for finishing up a job.
All right. And thank you guys again for your wonderful answers. I think it's time for me to turn it back to Stuart.
Great. Well, thank you, Yayu, and thank you, the panel, Brian, Kevin, Matt. This has actually been an extraordinary opportunity to hear from the owner side, not just about innovation itself as the topic, but really some of the challenges that you're facing. And the themes certainly were many, but the three that I picked out: diversity, partnerships with industry, and in-person versus team building with technology versus in person. And so, you know, those are really great opportunities as well for innovation, and certainly huge areas that we can all improve on and find better ways to to solve those problems and challenges. So thank you for that, being open about that and really helping us to really see where that opportunity is. And I think it is important, even for CIDCI, really to be able to reach out to the owners and to get them involved. So really appreciate all the time you put into preparing for this and your just being really transparent with your ideas. So how has this week been? And this is our, as we said, this is our 5th day, and there's really some very strong themes that have come across. So I'm just going to really be very brief with those. But we started the week with the history of the future, which was very interesting. And the big themes several of the big themes that came out of there are digital, 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 digital. That's the future. And when we talk about the future, this is like the future for 2050, moving in that direction. Certainly global. So however we're thinking about anything, particularly for innovation, things are going to impact everything globally. And then again, the theme of diversity. And one of the real interesting things, because I think we all recognize the importance of diversity, but when we talk about innovation, innovation can't happen unless we have more minds working together and representing different aspects of life. And so I don't think that's a new idea, but I think what is important is the recognition now that it's not going to happen unless we really, really take it seriously. So these themes are very important from the talks that we had this week. Second of all, so then in terms of we had innovation in terms of failure, and meaning basically, you can't be afraid to fail. You want to innovate, you can't be afraid to fail. And I think that's really important to understand, and that it's not that you can't innovate without failure, but you can't be afraid to fail. And I think that's important. Third was Bosch gave us a real opening into such a large organization that has put together an R&D team of roughly 8% of their financial organization is research and development. And that's national and international. That's huge for a product company. And of course, they're in several different markets, as we all know, in terms of appliances, but also construction. So when you think about such a large organization, and what they've recognized in that is, within their ability to do that, is to create some smaller startup companies within their own company. And I'm going to say organizations, maybe companies not the right word. But the point is the innovation comes from being able to be nimble. So also then we in terms of startups yesterday, we learned from 4 startups, and one, this is encouraging that there's so much emphasis now on energy, and how do we produce energy, how do we use energy, and ways that we now in a much more sustainable world. One, also starting to really reduce waste. These startup companies are really thinking about these topics and very, very focused now on areas to innovate. Another is the whole future of AI and being able to predict outcomes and directions and decision making. So again, these are all huge areas, and there was a lot more to say about each of these. So, but this is just, if we're going to walk away with any major themes, these are the ones that I think that we've taken from here. And then again, back to the owners, a lot of emphasis on really on collaboration and new methods, the recognition again that we need to bring a lot of minds together and able to collaborate to move ideas forward and create new ideas. And then, of course, using what's the future of new softwares. So with that, I think our challenges are in those themes. And so I think for CDI in moving forward, we would encourage anybody that has been able to participate. That number one is, please go to the website, go to YouTube, listen to the presentations that were made this week, because they are really fantastic, and they're encouraging and very exciting, and certainly a lot more themes than I was able to summarize. But then finally, I think it's just really important. One is to thank our audience for participating both on these in these sessions, but also again, encourage you to go to our website. And then, so individually, Katie, the tremendous amount of work that you did in order to bring all this to here and to make it available to actually be here for the last 5 days and make it so successful. Thank you. And Margie, for your endless work to bring all this to be very real, and setting up and doing all the work. All of these presentations, all these conversations, as everyone knows, is Margie spent endless hours trying to prepare all this. So thank you. And again, and finally, I've said it 6 times, but please visit us, YouTube. Please talk to our board of directors. Talk to anybody that was on the panels. Bring us your ideas. Help us engage. Help us to grow. With that, I don't have anything else. I'll turn it over to Margie for final words.
Last thing to note is that CIDCI will have another webinar on October 21st about what shipbreaking, the dismantling of major cruise ships, might be able to teach us about waste and disposition of buildings, which is something we never want to think about. We always want to think about the excitement of a new project. Well, actually thinking about waste and what happens with waste at the end of the project is something we all need to learn more about. So join us on October 21st. Thank you again to our amazing panel. I was reflecting that for our panelists, you're the 3 entities we were all thinking about in the beginning of the pandemic. The medical research that was coming out of UC San Francisco, we were all relying on the technology of Google to get us through. And oh yeah, that toilet paper thing, Matt. Anyway, thank you all, and Yayu for doing such a lovely job of wrapping it all up. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on October 21st. Thank you again.